Welcome to the Small Biz 101 podcast, a show for big dreamers who want to start or grow their small businesses. And now, your host, long-term small business owner and strategic business coach, Connie Weitzel.
Thank you for joining me for this 7th episode of the Small Biz 101 podcast. I am thrilled you can be here with me. I have owned 2 of my own small businesses, one running an HR consulting firm for the past 16, going on 17 years now, and a business coaching practice for the past 5, because there is nothing that makes me happier than to help others start and grow their own profitable and fulfilling ventures. Today, I am continuing the Right Biz for You series. Today, we're going to be discussing small business cautions and finding time for your small business. If you would like to hear more about this series, about how to find your own ideal small business, in previous episodes, I've talked about the importance of doing a self-assessment, talked about sources of business ideas, the types of businesses that are out there, and how to put all of these together. Along with, we've had some interviews with other small business owners and talk to them about how they applied these processes in their own journey to becoming small business owners. So please, I recommend you go back through those first few episodes and give them a listen. As you're going through this process of thinking about what is the right small business for you, I want to take some time to talk about some cautions as you're going through this process. And it's great to think about all of the terrific aspects of starting your own small business, but there are some things that you need to look out for, both in the process of determining what that business might be and also starting the process of creating this business. So I've got 3 cautions in particular to go over today. The first one involves current employer considerations. Many people start their businesses as a side business, building up their new venture during off hours, after work, working on weekends, while continuing to work a full-time job. It makes sense. It's a great way to test the waters out and maintain that financial base, that security, until you're ready to make the leap into this full-time small business work. I have been an HR consultant, as I mentioned, for several years, and my work has specialized in human resources, legal compliance, and I've seen a lot of these issues come up related to current employers when people are working on businesses on the side in my work with some of my employer clients. So I'm pretty familiar with this and just want to help you look out for some of these things to give consideration to when you're thinking about working on your business while you still have another employer. All right, first of all, if your idea for a business involves providing a similar service or a product that's similar to what you already provide in your job or what your company already provides, that's the time for some red flags to go off, to know that there are some things you need to look out for. And this kind of thing often happens, right? People work for someone else, but they feel that perhaps they could do it better on their own, or they just love the work and they want to create their own business in a similar field. I see that happen sometimes with financial advisors who may work for a larger organization, and then they decide they want to become independent so that they can recommend all sorts of investments to their clients. There's one example. Another might be a massage therapist who works for a larger organization, say one of those massage envy chains, or even a smaller organization where they're working for someone else. And they decide after they have a lot of experience that they want to start up their own storefront, their own therapy service business. Those are just 2 examples. There are so many others to consider. But I'd like you to think about this if you're in this situation. Number 1, do you have an employment agreement with your employer? This can be anything from a multi-page formal contract to a letter of appointment. It could even be just an email that the company sent as they were your potential employer telling you about the terms of employment. You need to check on those. A lot of times the situation pops up where you may have worked for your employer for so long you don't even remember. Regardless, check on this because you'll want to look at one particular thing in that employment agreement, and that's to see if there's a non-compete clause. Again, we're talking about if you're starting a small business that's similar in any way to the type of work you do with your current employer or that your current employer provides a similar service or product. If you have a non-compete clause, that doesn't mean you're out of luck in terms of a small business, but you just need to be careful. Read it carefully to see the boundaries of it in terms of number one, what it prohibits you from doing. Number two, for what period of time. And number three, within what geographical range. Those are typically the boundaries that you'll find in a non-compete clause. Then, after you've looked at that, whether it seems like you'll be okay or not, check with an employment attorney in your state. There are very state-specific regulations around these non-compete agreements, and you'll want to check. If it looks like you're going to be okay, you still want to get a legal opinion. Your employer might down the road see it another way, and you want to be prepared. Alternatively, it may look like you can't do what you would like to do, but don't lose heart. Again, check with an attorney in your state. In some states, non-competes are almost non-enforceable. There are so many regulations, so many laws, there's so many things that need to be in that agreement for it to be enforceable. Just as an example, the state of California is one of the most pro-employee states out there. So it's really tough for employees to enforce these types of agreements there unless they're done a very specific way. And other states have varying opinions about these and require different elements to be enforceable. Sometimes employers create these clauses without even knowing whether they are enforceable, or they may not even care whether they are. They just throw them into these agreements because they do tend to have a chilling effect. And they may deter someone from working for a competitor or becoming a competitor just for their existence. It can scare people away from doing that. And sometimes that's the intention of the employer. As I'm talking through this, I'm thinking, I just want to make sure you know, I am not giving legal advice here. I am not an attorney, but I have worked in this field long enough to know that if such a clause exists, you should consult with an attorney. It needs to be somebody who's knowledgeable about employment laws in your state before moving forward with your business. What if you don't have an employment agreement, specifically between you and your employer? It still doesn't mean you're quite out of the clear yet. Think back when you were first hired. You were probably given an employee or an employment manual. We used to call them personnel manuals. I'm really dating myself here. And again, this may be a situation where it's been so long ago, or maybe your employer hasn't updated it on a regular basis as they should. Even if you think you don't have one or haven't received one, check on this. And the reason why, for a couple of clauses that might be in there might be a non-compete clause in your employment manual. It could be there because it applies to all employees, or it could apply to employees who are within a certain job category. For example, if they're in sales. If that's the case, follow the same process I talked about earlier. If your work in any way could be seen as competitive to your current employer, you'll want to bring this document to an attorney in your state for an opinion and to see how you should best move forward. Now, what if your business is not at all in competition with your employer's business? There are still a few things to watch out for. Again, thinking about that employment manual, one other clause to look out for is something related to outside employment or secondary employment. What this typically says is that your job with your current employer is your primary responsibility, and that you agree that if you have to work, say, overtime or on weekends, even if you have a second job or a second business that requires your attention, this clause will say that your current job must take priority. The clause may also state that you are required to tell your employer if you work a second job so they can approve you doing this. That's allowable in some states. One of my bigger clients does this with their employees. It feels and it seems, and I think it is, very Big Brother-ish, but these clauses are out there and you need to be careful and look out for these. If this is the case, you do want to abide by these clauses. You don't want to do anything that's going to put your current source of income in jeopardy. Here are some other things to look out for when it comes to working on your new small business, perhaps as a side business, while you're working with your current employer. Only work on your business on your hours, never on your employer's hours. Even if it seems like work is really slow, there will always be something else you could do with your current employer. Don't shift over and do your own work on their time. Similarly, only use your equipment, your computer, your software, your phone, your fax machine. Yes, there are still businesses that require fax machines. Again, related back to those employment manuals, often these manuals have clauses about the use of company equipment and software that states that they can only be used for your employer's business purposes. They specifically prohibit using them for personal reasons, and you don't want to be found in any kind of violation and be disciplined or even discharged for violating that kind of a clause. So just avoid it anyway. Don't use equipment, don't use supplies, don't take paper, files, pens, whatever that might be. May seem like a stretch, but some businesses are bears about this, and they can consider this theft and discharge you for it. So just be very careful if you're working on your own business while employed with someone else. On the positive side, if it seems feasible that your employer will be reasonable about this, and many are, let them know what you're doing. Talking about that could really end up being helpful for both of you. The reason why I say that is that sometimes the service you provide might be complementary to their services. So they may become a source of business for you. I learned that through personal experience when I started up my first HR consulting company. My business partner and I, at the time, before we started our business, we both worked in a law firm, and we worked in the labor and employment area. There, we helped employers who were faced with charges of unlawful action, unlawful sexual harassment, racial discrimination, that kind of thing. And over the course of our work, we also did training and worked with companies doing their employment manuals. We worked with HR representatives to help them enforce certain laws like FMLA. Over time, my dog just joined me here. Hi, Vinny. Over time, we decided that we wanted to do more of the preventative work, more of the training, the developing manuals, the supporting the HR departments and enforcing policies, and do less of the reactionary work, handling the employee lawsuits. And that's why we decided to start up our HR consulting firm, so we could help people early on prevent these kinds of issues from arising. Once we decided to do this, we were upfront with the law firm about our decision. We told them about 6 months out what our plans were. It worked out great. Most lawyers, at least at our firm, didn't want to do that kind of work, so they actually became a referral source for us with a law firm's clients, and we became a referral source for them when we were working with people and these kinds of issues and lawsuits came up. So it ended up being really mutually beneficial, and that could be the case in your situation as well. You often hear stories about people who leave businesses and then they become consultants to the business. That may be another reason to talk about this and plant some seeds about your idea. That can end up being a win-win situation for both parties, right? You have control over your work, and they save money, frankly, by not having to pay the overhead that a full-time employee generates. They don't have to provide those benefits and have the overhead of the workspace. Moving on then to caution number 2, avoiding overwhelm and finding time to do this. As with most people, I'm sure you likely have a pretty busy life right now to start with. Seems like everybody does. We work, we have families, we have outside enjoyments and activities. When you're thinking about starting up a small business, whether it be full-time or as a side business, you need to be very careful to set boundaries to avoid overwhelm, to avoid stress. Starting a business I don't care what anybody says, starting a business takes a lot of time and a lot of effort. And things always pop up that you never could have considered. I don't care how great of a business planner you are, things will pop up. It will take time, it will take effort, and it can cause stress. Here are some ideas for avoiding overwhelm and finding time to do this work when you're first starting out, exploring and starting out your new small business. One is to set aside regular days, regular times to do this work on your business. Treat it like you have a second job if you currently are employed. Even if you are doing this full-time, think about the tasks that you have to accomplish and group them together. Schedule your time around those groupings. Maybe some of the time you need to spend on setting up the foundation, the operations around the business. Some of the time is planting the seeds and starting to develop the business. Think about the types of projects that you have to do. Group them together and schedule time to do those throughout your workday, so you're not so overwhelmed with thinking about a 5-page business plan or action plan or to-do list. Just focus on certain areas at a time. Another tip is to, and this seems like common sense, but a lot of times people don't do this, ensure that you have the support of key people who are around you, key people in your life, because this is going to affect them. If you're married, make sure that your spouse is on board. Same thing if you have children. You can really be a great role model for your child if they see you and see you putting in the time and effort and really getting excited about what you're working on. It inspires them as well. Other key people, your employers, as I discussed a few minutes ago. Friends too, talking with people. You can start planting those seeds with people who can help you develop your business once it's set up. Another tip related to avoiding overwhelm, finding time, is to look at everything that you're doing in your life and see where you can begin to cut non-essential activities and stop committing to things that just at this time don't align with your priorities. Of course, that can change down the road, but your new small business needs to be at the top of your list or close to the top of your list of priorities. So this is not the time to take on additional roles. Don't decide that once again this year you're going to coach your daughter's soccer team or volunteer to lead a project for a local charity. Some of these things you may be able to, or may feel like you have to do, but be really, really careful and be ruthless with your time when you're starting up this small business. You may have to take time out. You may have to cut back on social activities. Maybe you can't go out quite as often as you used to because now you need that time. And frankly, you're going to have just as much fun working on your small business. Don't ever cut yourself off completely from enjoying life. But I call it your no muscle, is really going to be worked out during this time because you have to create time for developing your new venture. I recently reached out to some people that I knew of who were interested in starting their own side business, and I asked them what their biggest challenge was. Almost everyone said that finding time was their biggest challenge. Most of them had full-time jobs, and finding the time between that and their families was becoming tough. What I talk about when that situation comes up is what I call the Facebook factor, and I take that from the latte factor. I'm sure you've heard about this by now. This is a phrase that David Bach came up with, probably 15 years ago. David Bach is a financial advisor. He's the author of The Automatic Millionaire, Smart Women Finish Rich, Smart Couples Finish Rich. If you're looking for financial advice, we've been following him for about 15 years, and I'm so glad we have. This guy's fantastic. But getting back to his latte factor, what he has people do at the very beginning of the process when you're talking about where to find money to save is he has you go through, whether it be for a day or 3 days or a week, he has you write down every single penny that you spend and what you spend it on. And he gives an example of working with one of his clients who said, I don't have any extra money to save. As she was standing there holding a nice big latte from Starbucks. So he said to her, well, how much did that latte cost? And then they went through some of the other things. Every day she would pick up her lunch. She would purchase her lunch somewhere. And they figured out that every single day she was spending about $10 on takeout that she may not have needed to do. She could have brought her own coffee. She could have made her own lunch. When you think about it, $10 a day, say you work 20 days a month, that's $200 a month, $2,400 a year. When you think about that in aggregate, that's a good chunk of money. And the reason why I'm talking about this latte factor, which, by the way, isn't just related to latte, it could be related to any of those things where we just lose our change. It's the same thing with our time. We have these time leaks where if you think about your time, and if you tracked your time, every minute of your time, what you're doing, like pretending you're a lawyer who goes through and writes down every 0.6 of an hour and records what they're doing. If you were to do that, you're going to find that there are leaks somewhere, whether it be social media, Twitter, Facebook, whether it be checking your emails. Maybe lately it's checking the news to see what latest executive order President Trump has come up with. Whatever that might be. If you work from home, it might be house distractions. Oh, I can get that one load of laundry in. Or, oh, a delivery's here. That interrupts. And if you think about that, if you think about those time leaks and you track them for even a short period of time, 2 or 3 days, and you consider that Facebook factor, you are going to find time that you can spend on your business. You're just going to have to be a little more organized about it and a little less distracted. There are apps out there that can help you with this time tracking. Things like A-Tracker, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, Chromita, Toggle. There are all kinds of time tracking apps that you can use that can help you figure out where your time is going. And I'll have these linked in the show notes. If you just go to the smallbiz101podcast.com website, you'll see links for those there. So see what your Facebook factor is. Where are you losing time? And let's start organizing your time and setting aside that time for your new business development. I talked earlier a little bit about block time. That's an important way of finding time as well and feeling less overwhelmed. Think about what you spend your day on, both professionally and personally. Every morning, I come up with my list and I break it down into 6 categories. I've already set aside family time when I know my husband's going to be available for us. But then separate from that, I have work time, when I'm actually doing the work for my clients. I have business development time. I have business administration time, when I pay the bills, when I prepare the bills, when I work on changes to the website, whatever that might be. I have personal care, time that I need for exercise, for tracking what I'm eating, whatever personal care that I need to take care of, maybe going to the doctor, whatever that is, I have time for that. And then home administration time for me. I take care of a lot of things around the house, and I could spend all day doing that, but I need to block that time into a chunk. And then my 6th category, which most people are not going to have, is meetup group. I run a pretty large hiking meetup group, and I run a professional book development meetup group, and they tend to take up a nice chunk of time, so I use that category as well. All right, so look at your time. How does your time group together? What makes sense for you? And then my suggestion is you sit down with a blank weekly calendar and block out times for each of those categories. You may do 2 categories within one day. Maybe one day is devoted to home administration in the morning and business administration in the afternoon. Maybe another day is focused on business development all day. Whatever works for you. But if you can set that into a schedule, have that available on your desk, schedule your activities around that. That means when you're working on business development, you don't have to worry about the business administration. You don't have to worry about taking care of the laundry or ordering groceries or going to the grocery store. I don't have to worry about working on the meetup. And that frees up your mind. That frees up your energy because you can become so focused. I love that block schedule. And that doesn't mean that certain categories aren't going to bleed into others. Sometimes you can only make a doctor's appointment during a time when you'd normally work, whatever that might be. There is some level of flexibility, but just knowing what each day overall is going to entail frees up time, frees up energy for you. Another thing to think about is getting help. Whether you're starting your small business full-time or whether you have a current job and you're developing it on the side, you need help. Think about areas where you can delegate. And it doesn't have to be expensive. Maybe you could invest in a virtual assistant, someone to help you with certain tasks that frees your time up to focus on income-generating activities. That's a wise investment. For people who are responsible for taking care of the house cleaning, get a housekeeper. Get someone to come in once a week, once every 2 weeks, even once a month. Having somebody doing that deep cleaning for you gives you found time. Think about ways that you can get help electronically. An example that I always use, because I almost have a phobia about going to the grocery store. I hate going to the grocery store. My husband can tell you I just completely tense up when I go in there. It's just one of those things that I do not enjoy at all. And it takes a big chunk of time. Instead, what I've been doing for years now is using online ordering services. When we lived in Chicago, in New York, I could use Peapod. That's kind of a national organization, peapod.com. And I'm telling you, it took me 10 minutes to order my groceries because it saves my prior lists. So I just go through and check things off. I save money because I can comparison shop online and I don't end up picking up extra items that I passed on the aisle. I know exactly what I need to get. And then I just set aside a 2-hour block for the groceries to be delivered. I don't have to go through what I don't enjoy, but that is a necessity in getting groceries. And I'm saving money and I'm opening up time for myself. So think about in your life, are there ways that there's something, either a person can help you or some kind of app or something electronically can just free up time for you? That's going to be an important part of the process. Okay, so we've talked about 2 cautions. Number 1 was those employer considerations if you happen to still be employed while you're working on your business. The second one was avoiding overwhelm and opening up time for yourself. The third one to be aware of is avoiding scams. If someone offers you an opportunity to make money quickly with little effort, run for the hills. There are so many opportunists out there about whom we need to be cautious. Just yesterday, saw an article in our local paper, the Buffalo News, talking about an email at-home job scam that targets University of Buffalo students. This is where my husband works, and I looked at this and I thought, boy, this is a perfect example of one of the scams that I'm talking about, because often these companies present these opportunities as start your own business, and it's certainly not just students who are targeted. What this particular scam is, it says it starts with an email with checks payable to the student sent to the student's personal UB account, and the checks are actually counterfeit and they're worthless. The email also includes a message offering students a 2-hour-a-day at-home job that requires no professional skills. And it says that students who fall victim to the scam risk the loss of personal financial information, fraudulent use of their bank accounts, and damage to their credit. Think about that. A company can easily obtain email information for pretty much anyone and send out this kind of message offering this great opportunity. Here's a check. Requires no skills, just 2 hours a day. Boy, doesn't that sound great. Really, any work-at-home business or job offers that require a pay-in, make sure you do your research on that. One particular area where these scams tend to be prevalent is with regard to medical billing. Often see postings for medical billing home businesses. Be really careful about those. When you see investment or business opportunity seminars, Now, I'm certainly not to say that there are not good ones out there, but when you see these that require a big investment, make sure you do your research before signing up for anything like this. Really, anything that requires paying for the promise of a business or a job. Now, unfortunately, there also remain certain MLMs, multi-level marketing organizations, that still are actual pyramid schemes. Now, again, not to say that this is the norm. There are so many great MLM companies out there providing excellent products with legitimate people selling these products. But again, research. There's a terrific resource out there that covers a lot of these scams. It's put out by the Federal Trade Commission. If you go to their site under Business Opportunity Scams, they keep that pretty well updated, and I'll keep a link to that website on the show notes for smallbiz101podcast.com. So that's another good area just to check out if you have any question at all about an opportunity. So to recap, we talked about 3 particular cautions when you are getting into starting your own small business. Number 1, considering current employer agreements, policy manuals, anything related to your current job or employer to make sure that you're not violating and putting yourself in any kind of jeopardy while you're working on your new business. Number 2, avoiding overwhelm, finding the time to work on this exciting new venture for yourself. And number 3, avoiding scams, many of which I covered in more detail. Finally, don't forget that the best small businesses are those that involve something you enjoy. And if you want to go back and go deeper into this process of figuring out what is something that you enjoy that other people are willing to pay money to learn about or to own, go ahead back to some of the earlier episodes. Episodes 1, number 3, number 5. They cover processes for uncovering what you really enjoy and how that could potentially be turned into a business. So go ahead and check those out. Coming up, I'll be continuing the series on finding your ideal small business idea. We'll be talking about determining the viability of your business idea. Really figuring out, does it have legs? Will it fly, as Pat Flynn likes to say on the cover of his book? I'll show you how to do research, current methods of doing research of the industry that you're thinking of, the specific business that you're considering. We'll look into how your potential competitors are doing. Figuring out, are there people who want to buy what you have to offer? So that'll be a fun episode to go through. I also have an interview coming up with a former college basketball coach who got out of basketball coaching, and he has now reached the peak of success as a financial advisor. He's running his own office, and he's made a fabulous transition from the world of athletics to the world of business. I think you'll really enjoy his story. If you would like more information about what I've covered in this podcast series about how to find your ideal small business, please help yourself to a free copy of my ebook, Passion to Prosperity, Finding Your Ideal Side Business. Now, although it was written with side businesses in mind, the process for determining your own small business is very much the same. So you'll see on paper more of what I've covered in the podcast series. There are some great exercises there, and you'll just have it on paper so you can take notes and really dive in more to find your own business. I would love to hear back from you if you have any questions or to share your feedback. If you go to the podcast website in the comments section, I'd love it if you'd leave your feedback there or any questions. That site is smallbiz101podcast.com. You can also join me at my business Facebook page. My business name is Scattered to Streamlined Business Coaching. So if you just do a search for that, I would love to see you there. You can also find that link in the show notes at the smallbiz101podcast.com website. You can also reach me one-on-one by email at smallbiz101podcast@gmail.com. I hope you will subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already, and continue on your path to creating your own wonderful, profitable, and fulfilling small business.
Thank you for listening to the Small Biz 101 podcast with your host, Connie Weitzel. For more information, visit smallbiz101podcast.com.